I'll never take another night shift again. Not after what happened. I wasn't supposed to work that night. It was supposed to be Danny's shift, but he called out at the last minute. Said he had food poisoning or something. I didn't want to cover for him, I'd already worked a full shift that morning. But my manager, Rick, begged me. Come on, Jason, just this once. I'll owe you. I needed the money. I said yes. I worked at a 24-hour gas station just outside town. The kind of place that gets a steady flow of truckers and night owls, but mostly stays dead quiet between 2 and 5 a.m. It was a small place, just a single-story building with a tiny back room, a single bathroom, and a wall of coolers humming in the background. The night shift was simple. Keep the place clean, ring up the occasional customer, and stay awake. Easy money. Or so I thought. The first few hours were uneventful. A couple of people came in, one guy grabbed a pack of cigarettes, another paid for gas. Other than that, it was just me and the buzzing of the fluorescent lights. Around 2:30 a.m., things started feeling off. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just a sense of something being wrong. I was behind the counter, scrolling on my phone, when I noticed something move on the security monitor. A flicker in the bottom left camera, the one that showed the side of the building. I glanced up, expecting to see a car pulling in, or maybe an animal running by. Nothing. The screen was grainy, but there was no movement now. Just the usual empty parking lot and the gas pumps sitting in the dark. I shrugged it off and went back to my phone. Probably just a glitch. A few minutes later, I heard something outside. A soft tap, tap, tap against the glass. I looked up. No one there. The station had automatic sliding doors, and the motion sensor should have picked up anything nearby. But the doors didn't move. I stood up and leaned forward, peering out into the dark. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no people, just the cold glow of the streetlights reflecting off the pavement. Maybe it was a bird or something, or a tree branch, except there weren't any trees near the entrance. I shook off the unease and sat back down. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., the power cut out. The store went completely dark. The coolers shut off. The buzzing lights went silent, and the security monitors blinked to black. For a second, all I could hear was my own breathing. Then, the emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in a dim reddish glow. They weren't bright, but they were enough to see by. I pulled out my phone to check if there was an outage in the area. No service, no Wi-Fi. Great. I grabbed the store's landline, but there was no dial tone. Even better. I wasn't scared. Not yet. Just annoyed. Rick had told me this place had wiring issues. Maybe the breaker tripped. I grabbed the flashlight from under the counter and stepped out from behind the register. The breaker panel was in the back room, just past the stock shelves. I hesitated. The back room felt darker than it should have. The red emergency lights barely reached that far, and the shadows seemed thicker somehow, stretching along the floor like oil. I shook off the nerves and stepped inside. The breaker panel was in the far corner, next to a stack of unopened soda crates. I made my way over, my footsteps echoing a little too loudly in the silence. As I reached for the panel, I heard something behind me, a soft shuffle. I froze. It sounded like footsteps, just one step. I turned around, shining my flashlight. Nothing, just rows of shelves stacked with chips, canned goods, and supplies. I swallowed hard and faced the panel again. My hands felt clammy as I flipped the switches, trying to reset the power. Nothing. The store stayed dark. I exhaled slowly, trying to push down the growing unease in my chest. Then I heard it again. A single step. Closer this time. I spun around, my heart hammering. The back room was empty. I swept my flashlight across the shelves. The shadows seemed wrong, like they were moving just out of my line of sight. I told myself I was being paranoid. Sleep deprivation and darkness can mess with your head. I needed to get back to the front of the store where the lights, the emergency lights, they were off. I gripped the flashlight tighter. I could still see, but just barely. The entire store was steeped in darkness, and the only light was the weak, flickering beam from my flashlight. A cold weight settled in my stomach. That's when I heard the door chime. Someone had entered the store. I hurried back to the counter, my mind racing. Maybe it was just a late-night customer. Maybe the power outage had tripped the automatic doors. But as I reached the register, I realized something. The doors hadn't opened. The chime had gone off, but the doors were still shut. I stared at them, waiting. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no people. Then, in the reflection of the glass, I saw it. A shape, standing just behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. Nothing. The store was empty. But I had seen something. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I wasn't alone. The air felt heavy, like something was pressing down on me. The shadows in the corners of the store felt deeper, darker, stretching unnaturally along the floor. Then slowly the automatic doors slid open. A blast of cold air rushed in, but no one was there. I took a step back, gripping the counter. Then, from somewhere deep inside the store, I heard it. A whisper. Low, faint. My name. Jason. The flashlight flickered. The security monitors suddenly blinked back on, and for half a second, I saw the backroom camera feed. There was someone standing in the stockroom. A tall figure, just out of focus. Then the screen went dark again. The whisper came again, closer this time. I ran. I don't remember much after that. I know I bolted out of the store, ran straight to my car, and tore out of the parking lot. The next morning, I got a call from Rick. Jason, he said, his voice tight. What the hell happened last night? I told him everything, the footsteps, the whispers, the power going out. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, Danny's in the hospital. I felt my stomach drop. He didn't call out sick. He was in an accident on the way to his shift. I didn't know what to say. I haven't gone back since, and I never will. I should have left early. I had every reason to. It was my last day at St. Mercy's Hospital, the last shift of my last week before I moved on to a better job. A private clinic, better hours, better pay, no more night shifts. No more graveyard hours spent wandering sterile halls under flickering fluorescent lights. I wasn't even supposed to be working that night, but they were short-staffed, and I felt guilty leaving my coworkers in a bind. So, like an idiot, I said yes. It was the worst mistake of my life. I had worked at St. Mercy's for 4 years as a night nurse, mostly in the long-term care wing. It was an old hospital, one of those places that felt haunted even in the daytime. The walls were a dull, sickly beige, the tile floors forever smelled of antiseptic, and the elevators creaked like they were on the verge of breaking down. By 10 p.m., the hallways were quiet except for the occasional beeping monitors or the distant murmur of late-night staff. Most of our patients were elderly or comatose, people who rarely had visitors, which only added to the loneliness of the place. But that night, the hospital felt wrong. It started with small things. At around 11:30 p.m., I was checking vitals when I heard a whisper, a soft, urgent voice coming from the hallway. I turned my head, expecting to see another nurse or a patient awake past hours. But when I stepped out, the corridor was empty. Hello? I called softly. No answer. I shook it off and went back to my rounds. At midnight, the lights flickered. Not unusual, St. Mercy's had a reputation for bad wiring. But this time, the flickering lasted longer than usual. The hallway lights dimmed to almost nothing, then buzzed back to life. When they did, room 229's door was open. Room 229 was empty. It had been for weeks. I felt a slow, crawling unease settle in my stomach. I walked to the door, my sneakers scuffing against the tile, and peered inside. The bed was made. The monitors were off. Just an empty hospital room. I let out a breath and stepped back. Maybe someone had forgotten to close it earlier. I turned to leave, and the door slammed shut behind me. I didn't run. Not at first. I was a rational person. Hospitals were old. Drafts happened. Maybe a suction effect from another door closing. But as I reached for the handle, the lights flickered again, and in the split second before they came back on, I saw something standing in the corner. A figure. Tall. Motionless. Its silhouette too dark, too solid against the wall. I yanked the door open and stepped back into the hallway, my breath coming fast. The light steadied. The room was empty. I told myself I imagined it. That's what I had to believe. At 2 a.m., the security guard stopped by. Carl was an older guy, been working there for nearly 20 years. He had the kind of face that always looked half asleep, but he knew the hospital better than anyone. I told him about the door slamming. He just grunted. Happens sometimes, he said, sipping his coffee. Room 229's weird like that. I raised an eyebrow. Weird how? Carl shrugged. Dunno. Patients in that room always complain about bad dreams. Some say they see people standing by their bed, place just has a bad feel to it. A chill ran down my spine. Ever seen anything yourself? I asked. Carl hesitated. Then, too casually, he said, no, and walked away. At 3:15 a.m., the intercom crackled to life, a burst of static, then a faint voice. Help me. I straightened. The intercoms weren't supposed to be used at night unless it was an emergency. I picked up the nearest hospital phone and called the main desk. Hey, did someone just use the intercom? Silence. Then, what intercom? I swallowed. The one that just came on. Another pause. Then the night receptionist said, there haven't been any announcements, Jake. I slowly hung up. I wasn't alone. At 3:45 a.m., I made the mistake of checking the security monitors. The cameras covered every hallway, every entrance, every patient ward. Most of the screens showed the usual. Empty corridors, silent rooms, dimly lit hallways stretching into nothing. But in the feed for hallway B, the hallway right outside room 229, there was something wrong. A woman, standing perfectly still in the middle of the corridor. Her hospital gown hung loosely from her frail frame, her hair falling over her face. I leaned closer. Something was off about the way she was standing. Too rigid, too unnatural. I picked up the phone and called Carl. There's a patient in the hallway, I said, my voice tight, near 229. Carl grunted. I just walked past there, man. It's empty. I turned back to the monitor. The woman hadn't moved. Check again, I said. A pause. Then the crackle of his radio. Fine. Be there in a second. I watched as Carl entered the frame. He walked straight through the hallway, right through the woman. I felt ice in my veins. He turned toward the camera. His face crinkled in confusion. Then he shrugged and kept walking. The woman stayed where she was. And then, slowly, she lifted her head. Not toward Carl, toward me. I slammed the monitor off. At 4:30 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not the normal kind. These were slow, deliberate, like someone was walking barefoot against the cold tile. I was at the nurse's station. The hallway stretched in both directions, empty. The footsteps grew closer, closer. Then, just outside the station, they stopped. I turned my head slowly. Nothing, just an empty corridor. But when I looked down, there were wet footprints on the floor. Leading right up to me, I felt something behind me, cold breath on the back of my neck. A whisper, right against my ear. Have you seen my sister? I ran. I don't remember how I made it through the rest of my shift. I stayed in the break room until sunrise. When the morning staff came in, I walked straight out and never looked back. I don't know who or what was in that hospital. I don't want to know. I took my new job and left that place behind. But sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I still hear it. The whisper. Have you seen my sister? I should have called in sick. It was my last shift at the department, the final night before I walked away from being a cop for good. 7 years on the force, and I was done. Tired of the late nights, the politics, the endless cycle of arrest and release. I had a new job lined up, private security. Easy money, no more chasing ghosts in the dark. That's all I wanted, to move on. But then we got the call, and I learned some places won't let you leave. It was just past midnight when the radio crackled. Unit 217, possible trespass, 204 Gable Street, abandoned building. Dispatch sounded bored. Routine call, some squatters probably, or bored teenagers breaking into condemned property. But 204 Gable wasn't just any building. It was the old Holloway house. Everyone on the force knew the stories. The place had been abandoned since the 90s, left to rot on the edge of town. No one wanted it, no one bought it, and for good reason. It had a reputation. People who went inside heard things, saw things. Some swore they felt hands on them in the dark. A few years back, a rookie on a dare spent the night there. He quit the force the next morning. Wouldn't say why. I didn't believe in ghosts. But I sure as hell didn't want to spend my last night chasing shadows in that place. Unfortunately, I was the closest unit. I sighed, picked up the radio, and keyed in. 217, responding. I had no idea I was making the worst mistake of my life. The place looked worse than I remembered. The Holloway house was a crumbling Victorian, sagging beneath the weight of decades. Windows shattered, paint peeling, the whole thing swallowed by overgrown weeds. The front door was ajar. I stepped out of the cruiser, flashlight in one hand, the other resting on my holster. Just a quick sweep, in and out. The air smelled damp like rot and mildew. Inside, the floor creaked under my boots. The place had been gutted years ago, nothing left but broken furniture and graffiti-covered walls. My flashlight beam cut through the dust, illuminating the grand staircase leading up into the dark. And that's when I heard it, a soft creak from upstairs. Someone was there. I exhaled, adjusting my grip on the light. Police. If anyone's here, make yourself known. Silence. Then, a whisper. Help me. My skin crawled. It came from upstairs. A kid? A woman? The voice was thin, weak, barely audible over the pounding of my own heart. I should have called for backup. Instead, I took the stairs. The second floor was worse. The air was heavy, thick with dust, and something else, something old. The hallway stretched into the dark, doors open on either side. My flashlight flickered, then I saw it. A figure at the end of the hall. Small, barefoot, a girl. She stood just outside a doorway, head tilted, dark hair hanging limp over her face. Something about the way she stood made my stomach twist. I swallowed. Hey, are you hurt? No answer. Just that same tilt of the head like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then she took a step back into the room and vanished. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed leave. Get out. Call it in. But I stepped forward. Because if there was even a chance someone needed help, I had to. That's what cops do. The room was empty. No girl. Just four walls covered in peeling wallpaper, an old mattress in the corner. The only window was boarded shut. I turned in a slow circle, my pulse hammering. I saw her go in here. I checked the closet. Nothing. Checked under the mattress. Nothing. But when I turned back toward the door, the girl was standing right there. Inches away, I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking. Up close, she was worse. Skin too pale, lips cracked, eyes wrong, dark, empty, not like a person's at all. She opened her mouth and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." The lights went out. Everything happened at once. The temperature dropped so fast my breath turned to mist. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Too many, too fast. The walls groaned like the house was breathing. And then the whispers started. Soft at first, curling through the air like dead leaves, then louder. Voices overlapping, urgent, desperate, angry. My radio crackled. Get out, get out, get out. I bolted. I don't remember hitting the stairs. I don't remember tearing through that house like something was chasing me. But I remember the front door slamming before I reached it. I hit it hard, shoulder first, wrenching it open. And as I stumbled onto the porch, gasping for breath, everything went silent. No voices, no footsteps. Just the wind in the trees, like none of it had ever happened. I called it in. Carl, another officer, showed up 10 minutes later. We went in together. The house was empty. No girl, no voices, no signs anyone had been inside. I didn't even try to explain. Carl just looked at me, shook his head, and said, "Holloway does that to people?" I quit the next morning, never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I still hear the whispers. And I knew I never left that house alone. I never used to believe in ghosts, or hauntings, or anything supernatural, really. I was a rational guy, a skeptic. I believed in things I could see, touch, and explain. But that was before I took the night shift at Grayson's 24-hour. Before I spent 8 hours locked in that tiny store, questioning every sound, every shadow, every flicker of movement in the security monitors. Before I saw her, I needed the extra cash. That's how it always starts, doesn't it? Money problems, desperation, some stupid excuse for putting yourself in a situation you should have avoided. I had just moved back to town after a bad breakup, crashing on my brother's couch until I could afford my own place. Grayson's 24-hour was the only place hiring. The owner, Mr. Grayson, was old school, no security system, no credit card machines, cash only. The store itself was a relic from the past. Faded linoleum floors, dim yellow lighting, shelves stocked with dusty canned goods, and off-brand snacks. The kind of place that felt stuck in time. I started off working the evening shifts, but when the night guy quit without warning, Mr. Grayson offered me an extra $3 an hour to take over. I should have said no. The first few nights were uneventful, boring even. The store was dead quiet between midnight and 5. Occasionally, a trucker would stop by for coffee, or some teenagers would come in looking for snacks. But for the most part, it was just me and the buzz of the refrigerator units. Then, on my fourth night, things started to feel off. It was little things at first. The cash register drawer being slightly open when I knew I'd closed it. The radio cutting out at random intervals. A faint, rhythmic tapping sound coming from the back of the store. I tried to ignore it. Told myself I was just tired, that I was imagining things. But then I started seeing her. It was around 2:45 a.m. when I saw the first glimpse of movement on the security monitor. The camera feed was grainy, black and white. It covered the front entrance, the aisles, and the narrow stockroom in the back. I was scrolling through my phone when I noticed something shifting in the stockroom camera. At first, I thought it was a glitch. The feed was old, prone to static, but as I leaned closer, I saw it. A figure, just standing there half hidden in the darkness between the shelves. She was facing away from the camera, her long dark hair falling over her shoulders. I blinked. When I looked again, she was gone. A chill ran down my spine. I got up, grabbed the flashlight, and walked to the back of the store. I wasn't scared, not yet, just cautious. I swung open the stockroom door. Nothing. No sign of anyone. Just rows of overstocked potato chips and cleaning supplies. I exhaled sharply and ran a hand through my hair. Maybe I was just seeing things. Long nights, bad sleep, it could mess with your head. I locked the stockroom door behind me and went back to the counter. For the next hour, nothing happened. The store was quiet again. Then at 4 a.m., the door chime rang. A woman walked in. She looked wrong. Her clothes were outdated, faded jeans and a white button-up shirt, like something from the early 2000s. Her skin was too pale, almost gray under the fluorescent lights, and her eyes, they didn't seem to focus on anything. She walked straight to the refrigerated section, not even acknowledging me. I watched as she stood in front of the glass doors, unmoving. Can I help you?" I asked. No response. She didn't reach for anything, just stood there, staring at the rows of bottled water. I felt a sudden irrational dread creeping up my spine. Then, without warning, she turned around and walked straight toward the counter. My throat went dry. She stopped a few feet away from me, staring. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't say anything. The air in the store felt heavier, thicker. I forced myself to clear my throat. "Do you need something?" A long pause. Then, in a hoarse whisper, she said, "He will arrive soon, wait." The words made my stomach twist. I forced a weak chuckle. I don't think so. She was gone. Just gone. I blinked. The store was empty. The door hadn't chimed. I stared at the empty space where she had been standing, my pulse hammering. I scrambled to check the security feed. My breath caught in my throat. The monitor showed the front entrance, the aisles, the counter, everything was normal. But when I rewound the footage to when the woman had entered, she wasn't there. The chime had rung, the door had opened, but there was no one on the feed. I sat back, my hands shaking. I was done. As soon as my shift ended, I was quitting. No extra money was worth this. At 4:45 a.m., the power cut out. The store went completely dark. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The security monitors blinked to black. The only light came from my phone screen. And then I heard it. A soft, wet drip, drip, drip coming from the back of the store. I didn't want to look. But something made me turn my head. Through the darkness, I saw her. The same woman, standing at the end of the aisle. Except now, her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and her mouth was open, too wide. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. A sharp, garbled whisper filled the silence. "He will arrive soon. Wait." The words were wrong, distorted, like they were coming from inside my head. The overhead lights flickered back on, and she was gone. I left before my shift was over. I walked straight out the door, got into my car, and didn't look back. I quit that morning. Didn't even pick up my last paycheck. I don't know what I saw. I don't want to know. But sometimes, late at night, when I drive past that old gas station, I swear I still see her, standing just outside the glass, watching.